Previously on the Seventh Valkyrie, Myrnst and Cyrus discuss the nature of gifts and how they both shape and are shaped by the world itself. How Cyrus and the Valgardians fit into this strange, complex puzzle is a mystery, but Myrnst has a few more tricks up his sleeve. Find out next on the Seventh Valkyrie.
There is no better place than here to further explore your affinities.
And so I did. I settled into that meditative trance of sensing that I had started to work on when I was in the forest. And as I sank into it, it was starting to become just as instinctive as smelling or seeing or tasting. With every breath, I could sense more and more around me, from the creatures burrowing beneath the soil to the colorful veins of rock deep in the mountain. Even out beyond us in the water, I could sense the difference between deep blues and the icy remnants of the northern currents that swirled around us. But there was one thing that stood out, shining. Wayla had come to join us by then, and as she was standing next to Myrnst, I opened my eyes. "She's way brighter than you," I said. "She's blue and you're sort of, sky-colored, obviously, but she is much brighter than you." "Sorry, was that rude?"
"Ah," Myrnst said. "You are not wrong. Though there are some who would find you pointing that out offensive."
"Oh," I said. I'm sorry."
"Oh, think nothing of it. The same people who'd be offended by that are exactly who you'd think, so plan accordingly," he said. "I have no such issues. Do you remember when I said that each gift is different for each person? Well, the magnitude of that gift can be quite apparent too. Not always accurate, as there are ways to inflate and deflate your presence to others who can sense such things. But you are correct in saying that Wayla has an order of magnitude more strength than I do. You need such potent power to control the waves, especially those brutal ones far beyond shore, who are untamed and only listen to the strongest wave riders."
How much do I have?" I asked. I can't see myself, or I don't know how to or how to tell."
He said. "Well, it's hard to say so early, especially since you only recently—"
"Do not shelter the boy," Wayla said.
"Out on the ocean it is clear as day the size of the wave and the strength of the fish. We do not convince ourselves that something like that is not so. The boy has little more than a ripple. A notable ripple, due to his strange color, like a small star in the depths of a night storm. But he is tiny nonetheless. Wayla, the boy has only awakened recently. Or perhaps he was not fully awakened at all. Any number of..."
This time it was me that spoke. "No, Wayla's right," I said, sitting back down on my rock. Even Eretheme was disappointed in me when I told him I was Valgardian, and I'm not sure if I'm a dud among my people or I don't have any real power, but whatever incredible strength the Valgardians are supposed to have, or were supposed to have, it passed me over and I didn't get any of it. I thought back to the forest, which had been so wild and vast and out of my control that the idea of bending any of it to my will just seemed absurd. Wayla nodded at my admission, neither content nor sympathetic, just acknowledging that we had all seen the same facts. Then, with nothing else to say, she returned back to walking the shore. I watched her go while Myrnst came up and sat down next to me.
"Now, Cyrus, there's no need to get down on yourself," he said.
I'm trying not to," I said. "But it's hard when everyone is talking like I'm supposed to be this amazing last Valgardian, and I'm really not. I'm just me, and everyone keeps expecting me to be something else, something more. Look, I can listen good, and I can speak interesting languages. Isn't that enough? The fire's words came bouncing back into my head.
Pathetic, weak, worthless.
Maybe he'd been right. Suddenly, Myrnst put an arm around my shoulder.
You are always enough, young'un, he said. And I am sorry personally that the expectations of this world for Valgardians made you feel like you were a failure. But you are not. Believe me when I say that you're not the first person to be disappointed in the magnitude of their gift, or frustrated by their abilities, or by the lack thereof. Too often young people like yourself measure themselves against the greatest, most powerful gifted they have ever seen and are crushed emotionally and spiritually when they cannot compare. But strength is not everything, Myrnst said. Wayla is more powerful than I am, that much is certain, but together, we are more powerful than either of us combined. It is together that we man that vessel, and by sharing our gifts we are far greater than the sum of our parts. You, my friend Cyrus, can already sense better than most gifted. You can communicate with everyone you speak to with your gift of languages, and beneath all of that, you are a bright young man with a good heart, he said. Those are special gifts that are uniquely yours. What does it matter if you can't steer a boat with your mind, or summon the wind? Despite my strength with the winds, I cannot fly like some can on their gliders, and for all her strength on top of the water, Wayla cannot dive like the Garlock warriors can, to the depths of the sea where the abyssal specters dwell. All we have is what is given to us, and the life we choose to live with it. He ruffled my hair, and for a moment we sat back in silence. Then Myrnst spoke again. One thing that you can take pride in, he said, is your ability to sense. That is a skill that can be refined and improved with time. Take a moment. What do you hear? What do you feel out there among the islands and the sea? I stood up and walked a little bit closer to the shore, waiting so that my feet were in the water. So, what? I just tell you what I can sense? I said. The Ailish call it recounting, he said, though I could tell he had switched to Ailish to use the native word, whatever it was. It's an excellent way to reinforce what you sense, gain confidence in your ability, and make it easier to remember what you are sensing. Okay, I said, breathing in. I closed my eyes. I feel sand beneath my feet, and the coolness of the ice water, even more so than the sea around us. And what is out there? He asked. Well, I can feel that there are a lot of fish out in the water and that there are birds on the islands around us, I said. Can you tell me more? He asked. Yeah, actually. I can tell that deep within the rock over there's fire, but there's also all sorts of colorful stuff. The veins of the earth, he said. You sense the magma and the natural bounty of its minerals. That is excellent, Cyrus. Can you spread your perception further than that? I took another step further into the ocean. Yeah,
I can see some of the animals that we passed on the way over here, I said. There's a lot of them in the water. Too many to explain each one or what it is, but I can see them pretty clearly up until, well, all the way out there at the boat. That's when they start to get a little bit fuzzy, and I'm not really sure what they are. I'm not sure what they are, but I can tell you, I can see it. I don't know if that makes sense. I can, like, see it, and I can picture it, I can see it, like I said, but I don't know what it is.
Regardless of the fact that you are not an expert on marine biology, that is amazing, Cyrus,
Myrnst said. He jumped to his feet.
Even I can't see that far, and I have spent the majority of my life refining the skill. Wayla, can you come over here?
Wayla turned from where she'd stood, watching the shallows, and then waded over to us.
Love, what can you sense out there?
He asked, pointing to the boat. I'm testing the boy's ability to search the depths. Again, he'd used another term, a Cestran one that time, for whatever search the depths meant for them. It was clearly a more important concept. Wayla let her hands fall to her sides so that the tips of her fingers were brushing the water and began to glow a deep blue.
I can trace the shapes of rock runners and silver streaks, she said. I can spot hawk rays and terra turtles, garden eels and aquaguanas. Cyrus, put your hand on Whale's shoulder,
Myrnst said. I did, and my vision of the ocean began to fill in with great clarity. Now I could see the fish and plants and the predators out there, and not just that, I could see the currents and the waves as they swirled and eddied in countless different shades. I couldn't imagine there ever being that many shades of blue. So that was how Wayla saw the ocean, and her vision and her understanding of it offered clarity to mine. With her help, though I wasn't exactly sure how I asked for it or she gave it, I stretched my senses even further, trying to pass up the islands of the archipelago, reaching out for the edge of the continent where the shallow water became the abyss. But just as my senses brushed up against the hunger of the deep ocean, everything faded into a shimmering blue haze, jarring me back to my normal 5 senses. I opened my eyes, startled. Wayla had stepped away, and Myrnst was right there where she had been, slapping me on the back happily.
Oh, you see there, boy,
he said.
We are more powerful when we combine our gifts. I could see the resonance between you and her from here. Wayla, did you notice a difference?
It was then that I noticed that she was breathing hard, with a bead of sweat running down her face.
He is strong in his senses, she said, and hungry to learn more. I could not have gone further than that, boy, no matter how hard you pushed, and believe me, you pushed.
I'm sorry, I said instinctively, but this time she gave me a real smile and put a hand on my shoulder.
No, boy. A hunger to discover is not to be apologized for, she said, a twinkle in her eyes. That is what drives us all the voyagers of the sea. I was a reckless wanderer long before I was a wave master.
I smiled and nodded back to her, but as I was, something tingled on the back of my neck. With an encouraging nod from her, she could somehow tell that I had sensed something, I waded a little further out into the water. I knew there was little to no chance that I'd see anything beyond that edge, but I wanted to try, and now that Wayla had guided me there, I felt sure I could reach it again. Myrnst said that sensing was something you could practice, right? Maybe I had a knack for this. I strode out waist deep and placed both of my hands in the water, and the sensations began to surge back into me. But they were different now. That tingle in the back of my neck had come from the ocean, but now it manifested in a gentle humming all throughout my sense of being. "Do you two hear that?" I asked. The two of them looked at each other, so I pointed out beyond the islands. Out there, I said. I can feel some sort of song? It's a deep, powerful humming.
The Song of the Sea is a powerful one, Wayla said, nodding. It fills all of us. What you hear is the collective will of all the currents and creatures that dwell in the boundless ocean.
I listened, feeling the sea rise and swell as she described it. But though I could hear the song she was talking about, or at least had a vague understanding, it wasn't the song that I was hearing. Can we do the thing where we look together? I said. I just want to make sure that we're seeing or hearing or sensing the same thing. Is that rude? She looked to Myrnst, who happily nodded, and then she walked out into the water with me. Myrnst joined her, and together they both placed a hand on my shoulders. I felt all of our senses start to merge again, Myrnst helping us this time, and the details began to crystallize. Suddenly, that song rang out with incredible clarity through our ears, swelling and growing. Suddenly, Wayla broke away and started dragging me towards the shore, Myrnst close behind me. I was confused at first, still sort of snapping back to reality from the sensing trance, but Wayla was still pulling me, heading up the slope and calling for Myrnst to follow. We scrabbled up the hill to the highest point, where Wayla grabbed my head and pointed my eyes to the west towards the continental shelf, past the islands of the archipelago.
What is it, love?
Myrnst asked as he arrived, but Wayla shushed him, holding fast as she came up alongside me, marking a point out in the ocean.
Watch, boy, she said, chin on my shoulder and pointing my face towards the ocean. Do not even blink.
I listened, and then with a gasp from Wayla, that song I'd been sensing carried out across the archipelago as a sparkling silver leviathan surged from the water into the air. It was from the Ray family, like the little ones we'd sailed against, only this one would have dwarfed our wave rider 4 times over, maybe 5, and it changed colors as it glided across the sky. For a brief moment of awestruck silence, we watched as the Leviathan glided through the air, and then veered straight up, flipping over completely before dropping through the sky and slamming belly first into the ocean behind one of the islands. The ray itself disappeared from view into the ocean, but the impact sent a plume of water erupting more than 100 feet high, misting down in rainbows against the sunlight. Wayla sat down in giddy laughter, and Myrnst shook his head in disbelief.
Now that, my boy Cyrus, was a gilded god ray, a beast I have never laid eyes on in all my years on the sea. Not only is that a holy sign of the highest look, which is why Wayla is still giggling, but it's also a sign that your senses are growing fast.
He looked out to the ocean and then smacked me on the back.
To spot anything from here, even a gilded god ray, Myrnst said. It's astonishing. Your ripple in this ocean may be small, Cyrus, but your heart is wide open. Cherish that, for you will see this world in a way no one else will.
I was still thinking about Myrnst's words hours later as I settled into my room in Flare. I guessed that god rays really were good luck, because we had sailed back to shore and I'd been dropped off exactly as planned, with a tall, incredibly handsome and stylish man from Flare. He'd brought me up through the city back to the pit, where I'd met Frida, our boss, who seemed to ooze confidence and unbridled sexuality out of every pore in their body. Frida had been quick to compliment me on my demeanor and flawless skill with languages, mentioned that May had made all of the necessary introductions, which I hadn't pried further into, and sent me up with another stylish man to the rooms where everyone stayed. And that's where I was now. I had a small space, but one that I could actually call my own. I was able to use my real name again, and wearing a comfortable change of clothes, which definitely revealed a bit more thigh and chest than I was used to, but they were comfortable, and that was good enough for now. They also weren't women's clothing, which unfortunately just didn't fit me. As I snuggled up for the night, the last thing Myrnst had said to me as we disembarked echoed in my head.
"In the face of this great and complex world," he said, "there are times when we all are as small as a spinner blenny, and times when we're all as large as the Leviathan. What matters is only what you do with the power that you're given. That is what matters, Cyrus."
Want to know what happens next? Join us on Patreon to become a hero of Edera and get early access to episodes along with bonus features, director's commentary, and the full Tab to Archive. You can also find other ways to support us at the links in the description, and we will see you next week.